Tonight, we're not heading into tales of grand wars or kings making sweeping proclamations. Instead, we're stepping quietly into two very different lives, worlds apart yet bound by the same medieval age. On one side, a monarch draped in velvet, surrounded by whispers of advisors, changing lives with the smallest nod. On the other, a peasant who wakes up cold, goes to bed hungry, and endures each season with nothing but sheer willpower, and hands hardened by endless labor. This isn't just a story of power, it's a story of purpose. Two human beings, born into roles they never asked for. One rules, one serves, one builds kingdoms, the other keeps those kingdoms standing. If slow, thoughtful history helps you unwind, I'd love for you to subscribe, but only if it truly brings you comfort. And let me know in the comments, where are you listening from? And what time is it there? I never stop being amazed at how far these little stories travel before they fade into someone's dreams. So, take a slow breath, dim the lights, and settle in. Let's step into two lives, shaping a world not with battles, but with silent, everyday struggles. You wake, not because you're rested, but because your body refuses to let you lie there any longer. Your back aches with a steady grinding pain, like a stone pressed into your spine. The mattress beneath you isn't really a mattress anymore. Once filled with straw, now it's mostly rot and mold, releasing dust and the sour smell of mildew each time you shift. You're not alone in it either. Your wife, your two children, and, well, something else. Maybe a rat, maybe a very unlucky squirrel, all crammed into the bedding as well. Whatever it is, at least it gives off a little warmth. And warmth these days is precious. The roof above you leaks. Again. Last autumn, you pressed clay into the gaps, hoping it would hold through winter. It didn't. All night long, a slow, steady drip has fallen into a tin bowl. Plink, 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 like some cruel clock, reminding you of every passing moment. The fire's gone out. You remember the glow before sleep, your arms wrapped around your youngest to keep her warm beneath a rough wool blanket. Now, only cold ashes remain, and your breath hangs in the air like smoke. There's no chimney, just a jagged hole in the roof that lets the smoke drift upward and the rain slip inside. It does neither job well. Outside, something groans. It might be the wind, maybe the pigs, maybe even your neighbor Edric, already at his chopping block. It doesn't matter. You rise carefully, making sure not to tip the small water bowl at your bedside. A thin layer of ice coats the surface. You break it with your fingers and splash it over your face. The sting tells you you're awake now. You reach for your tunic, the same one you wore yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that. The fabric is rough, heavy with the scent of smoke and earth, patched so often that the patches themselves carry patches. You tie a bit of rope around your waist. The leather belt broke last year. Your feet touch the dirt floor. No shoes. You once had a pair, but the soles wore through. The leather split, and eventually, you stopped trying. Now, it's bare skin against frozen earth. It hurts, but at least you think there's no danger of anyone stealing them. Your home isn't really a house. It's a single room. No hallways, no separate spaces. Just one small hearth in the middle, a few tools hanging crookedly on the wall, and scraps of fabric nailed over the windows to keep the wind out if fortune smiles. Maybe you own a bench, a stool, or even an iron pot. Privacy. That's a luxury you've only heard of. A medieval peasant doesn't live alone. Everyone crowds in together. children, sometimes even the animals. A goat might curl near the door for warmth. Chickens wander inside, pecking for stray kernels of grain. Your wife still lies in the bedding, though you can't tell if she's asleep or just pretending. She was awake most of the night with the baby, whose fever won't break. You've tried everything you know. Garlic hung by the bed, whispered prayers. A holy scrap of cloth tied around her wrist. Nothing works. You don't speak of it anymore. From outside, you hear the rough sound of coughing. That's your eldest boy. At the fire pit, he's only 10, but already works with the weight of a grown man. He has to. There's no one else. You pull a chunk of bread from the makeshift table, if you can call it that. It's only a board balanced across 2 stumps. The bread is rock hard. You dip it into a cup of water to soften it, but it doesn't help much. You chew anyway, ignoring the ache in your jaw. It's made from barley, maybe rye, bulked out with whatever scraps were at hand, peas, ground acorns, sometimes even sawdust. You bake once a week, and by the second day, the loaf is already stiff as stone. Your eyes land on a small wooden carving fixed to the wall, a rough figure of a saint whose name you never learned. You whisper a prayer, not in Latin. You don't know the words, but in rhythm, in sound. The syllables carry their own kind of holiness. Maybe that's enough. For a moment, silence. Then a rooster crows. Not yours, of course. You've never owned one. It's Edric's, your neighbor's. It crows like it knows what you lack. Sharp, smug. You stretch your back. It pops 3 times in protest. That, you think grimly, is your morning song. You breathe deep. The air tastes of damp straw, ashes, and wool long overdue for washing. The cold has become part of you, an old companion that never leaves. Time to begin the day, and every day starts with wood. Without a fire, there's no warmth, no meals, no way to boil the lice from your clothes. You take up a dull hatchet and drag your feet toward the wood pile. Cutting trees in the Lord's forest is forbidden. Even gathering fallen branches is technically against the law. But everyone does it. You just pray the steward isn't nearby. The ground squelches underfoot. Mud clings stubbornly to your skin. In winter, the paths never dry. Just rutted grooves carved by carts, hooves, and weary footsteps, churned again and again to sludge. You slip once and mutter a curse, soft enough not to wake the baby. Later, you'll check the thatch for leaks, patch the fence, feed the pig, scratch at the frozen garden plot. Maybe, if there's anything left, carry dough to the village oven. But before all that, you nod to Edric. He grunts back. No words are needed. You both know the shape of this day. You've lived it together, over and over. The king's chamber is already warm. A fire has burned through the night, tended by a servant whose sole duty is to keep the flames alive. The logs come from the royal forest, birch, perhaps cedar, filling the room with a faintly sweet smoke as they burn. A soft knock at the door, silence, then another. Slowly, the door creaks open. A valet enters first, moving with quiet precision. Placing a pitcher of warm water at the bedside, another servant follows with a robe already warmed by the fire. A third carries a towel. A fourth presents a pair of slippers. Each bows in turn, one after the other, like the steady ticking of a clock. This is not ceremony, it is routine. No king rises alone. To wake, to dress, to wash, every act is assisted, every detail is choreographed. Even the simple act of opening one's eyes is a matter of politics. Who is granted entry? Who speaks first? Who touches the king's robe? Every gesture reaffirms order, hierarchy, control. The king stretches, Curtains are drawn back, and sunlight floods in, streaming through stained glass panes of crimson and blue. The light spills across the polished stone floor, bright and solemn all at once. He yawns, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. His feet never touch the ground. Slippers are slid on before he moves. A robe is draped across his shoulders. He hasn't lifted a finger. At the wash basin, warm water waits, scented faintly with rose oil. He splashes his face, pats it dry with a towel held open for him. Then he leans toward a polished silver mirror. Not bad, he thinks. Perhaps a little pale. He sits. Another servant trims his beard. One combs his hair. A balm is rubbed into his hands. Another arranges his clothing for the day. A doublet embroidered with golden thread. Hose dyed in deep green. A cloak lined with fine fur. These aren't just garments. They're declarations. Each color, each fabric, each stitch proclaims wealth and authority. The dyes alone, saffron, woad, madder, are the sort of pigments peasants may never even see. The smell of breakfast drifts in. Fresh bread, honeyed figs, sausages, eggs, something sweet, something savory. Soon it will be set before him in the solar, beside a roaring fire, and beneath a grand tapestry of his grandfather slaying a wild boar. While he eats, perhaps he will hear music, or poetry, or scripture. Perhaps guests will be admitted, or perhaps not. Official matters can wait, unless, of course, war has broken out, or a bishop arrives unannounced. There's a knock at the outer door. A steward with the morning's reports. News from the border, a letter from the bishop, a request from a noble, accounts of grain and taxes. The king waves it aside. Not yet. Instead, he settles deeper into the warmth as a lute begins to play softly in the corner. The bells outside strike the hour. The sound is pleasant, distant, untroubling. The world beyond these walls can wait. For now, he sips his wine, content. Breakfast can wait too. But for the peasant, breakfast is not a luxury. It is not ceremony. It is survival. In the dim hut, the fire sulks low, little more than tired embers. You crouch near the hearth, poking gently with a stick, blowing softly until a faint flicker stirs. Your breath fogs in the cold air. If luck is with you, and if your kindling hasn't soaked through overnight, you might coax the flame high enough to warm a small clay pot balanced carefully on the edge of a stone. You stretch your hands toward it, desperate to steal back even a shred of the warmth that the night has already taken. There is no table, just a flat board stretched across two stumps, burnt black in places from holding pots over the fire. You reach for a wooden bowl, its edges chipped, its shape uneven, and scoop in what might, at best, be called porridge. The recipe never changes. Water, a little ground barley or oats, maybe a pinch of salt if fortune allows. Milk is out of the question. The cow you once had didn't survive last winter, and what little milk remains in the village is claimed by the reeve. The porridge is thick, more paste than soup, gray and lumpy, with husks that crunch unpleasantly between your teeth. You tear a chunk from a coarse, dark loaf. Bread made of barley, rye, and whatever else could be ground fine enough to resemble flour. Wheat bread is for lords. White bread, well, that's something you've only heard about in whispers. This loaf is days old, dense, and heavy. You soften it in the hot porridge, just enough to bite without cracking a tooth. Then you chew, slowly, patiently, with the understanding that there is no alternative. Most peasants in medieval Europe began their day with something like this. Back then, the word breakfast wasn't common. The idea of breaking a fast assumed there had been one in the first place. For peasants, the hunger never really ended. It simply ebbed and flowed. Your children gather close, rubbing sleep from their eyes, coughing into their sleeves. One eats with both hands, the other just stares into the bowl, unwilling. You tell them to eat slowly, not because more food is coming. It isn't, but because if the bites last longer, the illusion does too. Your wife sips from a cracked wooden cup, weak ale, thin and bitter, but safer than water. The stream outside carries sickness as easily as it carries fish. Boiling it would make it drinkable, but that requires firewood you don't have. And so, ale, grain left to ferment just long enough to kill what the water hides, becomes the family's drink, even at dawn. On rare mornings, breakfast might include an onion or a leek boiled with a scrap of fat scraped from the bottom of a barrel. Not today. The pig was slaughtered weeks ago. What little meat you kept was salted and hung high in the rafters. Most of it, by law, went to the Lord. Meat, bone, skin, survival, taxed away. Outside, you hear it again. Ď𝙖𝙪𝙧 coughing, already at his work. You envy his strength. Or maybe it's his chickens you envy. He has 3. You have none. A knock at the door interrupts. Soft, hesitant. It's a child, barefoot, mud-streaked, asking if your wife has herbs for her sister's fever. You don't, not really, but she'll find something anyway. Maybe dried nettles, maybe yarrow. In return, the child offers half a heel of bread. The trade is made in silence. The sun is climbing now. Slowly, its light melting the frost, clinging to the sill. You rise, stretching your aching back, and wipe your hands on your tunic. The bowl goes back to the shelf. The pot, still faintly steaming, is set aside, perhaps for dinner, perhaps not. That was breakfast, and now comes work. At this very hour, in a palace 50 miles away, though it may as well be another universe. Breakfast is being served too, but there, it is no necessity. It is spectacle. The king waits in silk sheets, the air filled with the faint perfume of wood smoke drawn from a fire that never goes out. A steward steps forward to announce the meal, though the aroma has already done the work. The king is guided into the solar, a private, sunlit chamber where tall windows pour light across painted walls and rugs woven by skilled Moorish hands. The table is laid out like a stage. Silver platters gleam, cloth napkins folded with care. Carved wooden bowls shine with enamel glaze. Knives are polished so brightly they reflect the face of whoever holds them. No dish reaches the table untouched. Each one is tasted first. The threat of poison is too real, in a world where ambition is as common as hunger. Under a linen cloth rests a soft white loaf, the prized manchet bread, made from finely sifted wheat, pale, delicate, pure. This is not food for peasants. Only the wealthy can afford the labor and care needed to produce something so rare. Alongside it sit poached eggs, gathered from palace hens, dusted with herbs from the castle gardens, spiced sausages, venison, boar, smoked and cured in ways a peasant might only hear about in passing. A bowl of figs, shipped at great cost from Iberia or the Holy Land, sliced open to reveal their deep red centers. Honeycomb drips over soft cheeses, crafted from the milk of sheep grazing lands the king himself has never walked upon. He eats slowly, not because he must, but because he can. There is no urgency. Beside his plate rests a cup of mead, golden and scented faintly with herbs. He drinks little, knowing another servant waits nearby with watered wine should he change his mind. For a king, breakfast is not about hunger. It is about presence, being seen. Attendants hover silently. Musicians play softly in the corner. The steward reads aloud the day's matters, noble petitions, disputes along borders, supply shortages from distant coasts. The king listens only half-heartedly, chewing a slice of pear poached in cinnamon. utterly forgettable. Even private meals are ritual. The dishes themselves act as symbols. The rarer the ingredient, the louder the statement. Spices like cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves traveled across continents, carried by Venetian and Arab merchants, are worth fortunes. A single sack of pepper might buy a cow. He finishes half a loaf, a sliver of ham, a pastry filled with minced apples and dried cherries. Then, with a simple gesture, he ends it. Servants clear the table in silence. A towel is offered for his hands, though he hasn't touched the food directly. The motion is part of the performance. Leaning back, he watches dust drift lazily through the sunlight. Servants retreat in perfect rhythm, as though rehearsed. At his feet, a sleek greyhound pads forward, resting its head against his slipper. The king strokes its ears absently. Breakfast is over, not because he is satisfied, but because he wills it so. One meal eaten out of necessity, the other out of abundance. The peasant scrapes the last sticky grains from his bowl and drinks thin ale because water might kill him. The king pushes away half a roasted bird because it's cooked a touch too long. The numbers tell their own story. A medieval peasant might survive on 1,500 to 2,000 calories a day, most from bread and pottage. A nobleman could consume closer to 4,000 while performing far less physical labor. Gout, the so-called disease of kings, was no metaphor. It was proof. Too much meat, too much wine, too little movement. And yet, in the end, neither man truly wins. The peasant rises from his bowl, still hungry, walking into a day that will demand everything from him. The king rises from his feast full, yet restless, walking into a day that will hand him everything, and demand only that he pretend it matters. Both step away from their tables under the same rising sun. One stomach aches from emptiness, the other aches from excess. Neither finds satisfaction. You reach for your tunic, not because it's fresh, not because it's fine, but because it's the only one you own. Peasants didn't keep wardrobes in medieval Europe. Clothes were not collections, they were singular. One garment, maybe two, if the harvest had been merciful. One for work, one for sleeping. Sometimes they were the same. Your tunic is rough spun wool, fibers coarse enough to rub skin raw if you aren't careful. Its color, somewhere between mud and straw. Once, perhaps, it was pale brown, but years of sweat, smoke, and dirt have turned it into something dull, something anonymous. The sleeves don't match. One cuff frays loose, the other carries a patch, stitched from a scrap of your wife's old dress. No one notices, no one cares. If fortune smiles, you might wear a linen shirt beneath it. The proper name is smock, but today isn't one of those days. Yours tore last week while hauling timber, the rip spreading wide across your side. There hasn't been time to mend it, and truthfully, linen offers little warmth against the chill. Wool it must be, itchy or not. Next come your hose. Forget the nobleman's soft woven stockings. You're a little more than long woolen tubes, sagging at the ankle, tied clumsily at the knee. One heel has worn straight through. You've meant to fix it, but every day, survival outruns sewing. Shoes, if you're lucky. Maybe you own a pair, cracked leather, patched with twine, soles more whole than hide. Most peasants go barefoot half the year, especially in summer. In winter, scraps of cloth are bound around the feet, or you simply walk with care. Today, you step into wooden clogs, heavy and unforgiving, but kinder than frostbite. Around your waist, a belt, though not leather. That split and snapped years ago, the same year your youngest was born. What remains is rope, a scratchy, fraying truth tied around you. A mark of station as much as necessity. No buttons, no zippers. Those belong to centuries yet to come. Clothes are held by knots, by toggles of wood, or by nothing at all. The neckline of your tunic hangs loose, stretched wide with age. Your wife closes it with a piece of twine. She does not smile, neither do you. There's no joy in dressing when every stitch whispers how close you are to nakedness. There are no closets here, no drawers. Clothing is hung on nails in the wall, or folded into a chest if you're fortunate enough to own one. Lice live in the seams, fleas too. You brush something off your sleeve and choose not to look closely. And even if you wanted better, the law would forbid it. In some parts of Europe, sumptuary codes restricted peasants from wearing fine fabrics or rich colors. Not that it matters. You could never afford them anyway. Purple, scarlet, gold. These aren't clothes. They're fairy tales. You've never so much as touched gold thread. Your wife dresses much the same. Her garments worn, patched, and plain. A mirror of your own life, stitched into fabric, a kirtle. If you squint, it's a kind of dress. Scratchy wool tied at the waist with nothing more than a cord. Her head is covered with a wimple, not for beauty, but for warmth, for modesty, for necessity. Her sleeves are rolled high. She is already working. The children wear hand-me-downs so patched and mismatched they resemble scarecrows propped against a fence. The baby is swaddled in rags. One rag has a hole patched with another rag, which will tear in turn. The cycle never ends. For a peasant, getting dressed is not transformation. It is not preparation. It is simply layering misery onto flesh, a thin armor against the cold, just thick enough to trick yourself into believing it matters. Still, you wear it, because stepping outside in nothing would be worse. In the castle, it is different. The king's garments are prepared long before his eyes ever open. Pages and valets lay them out, warmed by the fire, so not even a single thread greets him with a chill. His dressing begins with what lies beneath, not the outer grandeur. First, linen. Soft, bleached white underclothes, woven fine from flax grown by peasants and purchased by nobles. The peasants grow the plant. The king wears the luxury, a shirt of flax, smooth and light, faintly scented with lavender tucked in by careful hands. He'll never know by name. Over that, hose, snug woolen leggings, dyed deep blue. The dye itself, a mark of wealth, extracted from woad, too costly for commoners. Next comes the doublet, a padded jacket tailored to his frame, fastened with neat rows of buttons carved from bone or horn. For the peasant, a button is necessity. For the king, it is ornament, a display of craft, proof of status, a luxury sewn into the seam. Then the cloak, velvet, dyed a rich burgundy, lined with marten fur. It spills from his shoulders, trailing close to the floor, until a servant carefully lifts and tucks it out of the dust. On his feet, soft leather boots crafted by the castle cordwainer, perfectly fitted. They have never touched mud, never known a road. Around his waist, a sash of silk, its ends embroidered with the sigil of his house. Silk carried from Byzantium across deserts, guarded by mercenaries, balanced on camels, traded at staggering cost, yet to him it is simply a pleasant drape. Jewelry is optional, but expected. A ring, a brooch, a clasp, set with stones, not for beauty, not even for security, but as reminders. His body is not ordinary. His body is sacred, adorned, elevated. As he is dressed, attendants murmur in the background. Weather, grain prices, the arrival of some foreign dignitary. It is noise. He hears it, but he does not answer. He is busy with the ritual of being clothed. The final touch, a circlet, not quite a crown, but enough to remind every eye what he is. lighter than the crown of state, suited for mornings. A symbol, not a burden. For the peasant, clothing is survival. For the king, clothing is performance. Every thread, every clasp, every button declares distance. He is stitched into power, wrapped in separation. And when he steps into the hall, robes trailing, hands ringed, boots spotless, no one needs words. They see him, and they understand. This is no longer just a man. This is a symbol, draped, displayed, and polished. And symbols, they're always dressed well. One man wears a single woolen tunic, patched so many times it barely remembers its original form. The other is layered in tailored elegance, every seam a statement. The peasant dresses himself, shivering beside a smoky hearth that coughs more than it warms. The king is dressed by others, standing in comfort beside a fire he never once has had to tend. Yet strip it all away, and beneath the cloth, both are men, one clothed in necessity, the other in ceremony, one wrapped for survival, the other for display, both bound by thread, but only one lives in a world where the seam never matter. You push open your door, and the cold greets you like a slap across the face. The hinges groan, weary as the rest of the house. The air cuts sharp, stinging the inside of your nose, making your eyes water. You squint into the early gray. The sun hasn't yet climbed the horizon, and so two worlds move forward beneath the same sky, one of velvet and gold, the other of wool and mud. The king, surrounded by comfort, never feels the weight of the land that feeds him. The peasant, surrounded by struggle, never escapes the demands of the soil that binds him. Both breathe the same air. Both watch the same sunrise and set. Yet their days could not be further apart. One life is consumed by survival, the other by ceremony. One ends each night hungry, the other heavy with excess. History often remembers the crowns, the castles, the feasts, but the truth of the past, the heartbeat of it, was carried on the backs of ordinary people, silent and unseen. So as you drift from this story into your own night, remember, greatness is not only written in marble halls, it is also whispered in muddy fields, in tired hands, in lives lived quietly but fully. If this journey through two worlds brought you peace or sparked thought, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and share where you're listening from. I love seeing how far these voices travel. Until next time, rest well, dream deeply, and let history remind you, every life, no matter how small, leaves a mark.